Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. Lovely to see you both. Hello.
Good to see you, Anna.
As ever then, to the front pages. The Guardian, to start with, leading with the announcement of an independent inquiry into the pandemic and many people's dissatisfaction that it won't happen until next year. The Metro understands Boris Johnson is the subject of a £535 county court judgment. The nature of the alleged debt is unknown. Downing Street has said the claim is without merit and the Prime Minister plans to appeal. According to The Telegraph, if new NHS guidance is to be followed, virtual GP appointments could become the norm even after the pandemic. Masks in shops and offices won't be necessary after June the 21st. That's from The Sun. The Daily Mail says dementia victims and their families have paid £14 billion towards adult social care since the Prime Minister promised to fix the issue when he assumed office. Yorkshire's Batley and Birstall News. Here's from Kim Ledbetter, the sister of the murdered MP Jo Cox, who has announced her intention to run as the Labour candidate for Jo's former parliamentary seat in an upcoming by-election. While the FT reports that US stocks are down amid fears the country's economy could be overinflating. Well, Andrew, Kevin are here. Let's start with the FT, shall we? Not that story about the stock falls, but those dramatic pictures we can see from the latest conflict in the Middle East. Words of Joe Biden tonight, who's spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu. But, you know, for both sides, this is testing times, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see now that the conflict is beginning to edge its way to the front pages of some of our newspapers. It's been an inside page story so far, but the images now are very dramatic. The intervention of the president is very significant, the American president. The foreign secretary spoken again today, defending the right of Israel to defend itself, but begging them to try to de-escalate the situation. It's a terrible mess, and it's the worst violence we've seen there since 2014. And you just get this horrible feeling because Netanyahu is all at sea. He's prime minister, but only just. He hasn't managed to strike a deal yet. Does he want, I mean, I'm careful of what I say here, but does a military, sharp military conflict bolster his position with some of the more extreme parties who he may then form a coalition with?
Yeah, I mean, you hope this is not politicking, which is sort of what you're suggesting, isn't it? Yeah, but I mean, the roots of this, as we all know, go so deep, obviously triggered by recent events. Do you see a way out? I mean, Biden talking about hopes that this will effectively end swiftly. One wonders what he said to Netanyahu, Kevin.
No, that's right. And of course, the US gives huge military aid to Israel, but Biden will have to try and get Netanyahu on side, because Netanyahu was basically given complete free rein by Donald Trump, who we call removed the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and ceased to have any semblance of trying to be an arbiter and fair play between the two. It's an incredibly intractable dispute, this, and it's not going to be resolved militarily to the satisfaction of either side unless they can somehow reach an agreement on land and security, a Palestinian state and security for Israel. The deaths are just going to continue, and there'll be periods when it's like this, and there'll be periods when it's calmer, then there'll be more periods like this again. And you look at the FT there has pictures of flames and destruction on both sides, but it's not really an equal conflict in the sense that Israel's a nuclear-armed power, and certainly in the Gaza and on the West Bank, they don't have those weapons. Probably just as well that they aren't used, but there is destruction. And there's no way forward for either side in violence. But it's how do you reach a settlement to this dispute that's in the interests of both Israel and the Palestinians.
Yes, and indeed we saw the Gaza night skies lit up by a huge explosion just in the last hour. So clearly it continues tonight, and we'll keep monitoring that. Let's move to here, though, the pandemic. I mean, a global issue, but the news today about the date for the start of this public inquiry. Criticism of when, but the detail of this will be, it'll touch so many subjects, won't it, Andrew?
Yeah, and look, there's always going to be criticism of when he holds it. He says it's going to start next spring. And I think it takes a long time to set up an inquiry of this nature. They've got to sort out the chairman, the terms of reference. It's a serious inquiry. People are going to be giving evidence on oath. And you have to remember, the Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq War finally reported in 2016, 13 years after the war. The inquiry wasn't even set up until 2009. So going on the recent precedent, next year is pretty quick, because we are almost certainly going to have another wave of COVID in the winter. Now, the various modelling that's being done for SAGE suggests it's not going to be anything like as serious as the other two waves, but COVID will still be with us. The NHS has to be on standby in case it does get serious. Of course, it is convenient for the Prime Minister that almost certainly conclusions of the report of the inquiry will be published after there's been a general election. And the people can deliver their own verdict, can't they, on whether the government handled the pandemic well or not, because there'll be a general election before that. And I suspect Boris will still be leader going into that campaign.
Yes, and perhaps no surprise that we get this announcement after the election that we saw last week, where the vaccine bubble, prompted people to be more supportive, perhaps, of their governments, be it the SNP in Scotland or, Labour in Wales and the Tories here in England. But fascinating, too, that 38 and 39-year-olds being asked for the vaccine. Biden tonight suggesting parents should get their 12 and 15-year-olds vaccinated urgently. So we see what happens with the modelling. But the minutiae of the detail that will be discussed will be, not just was the lockdown too late, was SAGE too secretive, was the information that came to the public correct, all of the contracts with PPE and everything. It's just such a big subject, as I said, isn't it, Kevin?
Oh, no, absolutely. 127,000 people are dead. It's cost tens, hundreds of billions of pounds. There should be an inquiry. I could see no reason for not setting this up to start in the autumn. But Boris Johnson's clearly kicked it into the long grass. Andrew said it was convenient for the Prime Minister. It's very cynical by the Prime Minister as well, delaying it until next year and then until after the next election, because I think the lessons to be learned need to be learned publicly. And we need to have a proper debate and sunlight, openness, transparency. You'll get better government that way. The Chilcot inquiry was far too late, and then it was too long for that report to come out. That this pandemic is here and now, yes, but you can still have an inquiry at the same time. Prime Minister seems to have time to go off on holidays and mystique played by other people and do lots of other things. So I can't see why he can't prepare for an inquiry when it's his turn to be questioned under oath. But no, I think he knows why he's delaying it, and that's because initially and up to last autumn, before the mass vaccination programme, he's not going to come out of it very well. If he's going to come out of it well, let him showboat if that's what he wants to do.
But Kevin, even if he could launch the inquiry in the autumn, most public inquiries take on average 2.5 years. And so even then, it wouldn't be reporting back before the general election, because the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which was a ridiculous Liberal Democrat measure, is being abolished. So he'll be calling an election long before then. So I think even if he'd gone in the autumn, we wouldn't get that report back in time. And of course, it could be longer, because Chilcot took 3 years, 5 years.
Andrew,
it took 7 years to report back.
Yeah, let's just move on if you don't mind, because, in some respects, some people are suggesting decisions are still being taken too late. For example, India going on the red list. And now, if you look at the front page of the Telegraph, an emergency meeting of the government's SAGE committee will convene tomorrow to discuss the rapid spread of the Indian variant. Now, is that a direct result of making decisions too late still? Kevin, this is worrying, isn't it? Because it puts in jeopardy the biggest opening of lockdown we have next week.
Yeah, so 727 cases within 45 days, which is 3 times quicker than the South African variant. And there was some criticism of not putting India onto the red list earlier and then quarantining people coming from that. And these are lessons being learned, or are they still being missed? But no, you're quite right. In that Telegraph piece, they raised concerns that all restrictions may not be lifted on June 21st. I'll be surprised if that happens, because the Prime Minister initially said it was all about the data, not dates. I think this is about dates, not the data now. I think it's been quite clear for some time. But if it's going to spread rapidly, and if the jabs aren't effective against it, then he would be duty bound, morally obliged to actually reconsider that June 21st deadline in England, because, of course, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland going at their own pace.
Yes, indeed. And let's go to the Sun then, talking about June the 21st, Great British Mask Off. I presume some scientists would prefer we kept some of those basic measures, as they see it, to keep masks on. How do you think you'll feel about masks coming off, Andrew?
Well, do you know, I think, Anna, a lot of people have got so used to wearing a mask now. When you go out of the house now, you check your keys, your phone, your mask. And I've got completely used to it. If I use public transport, I think I'm going to wear a mask the whole time. I wouldn't wear one in the office. And if I go in a shop, I think possibly I would wear a mask. I don't mind. I don't find it a huge invasion of my civil liberties. And if you go to countries like Singapore and Korea, they've been wearing masks for donkey's years in public and in shopping malls, and they've always had these hand sanitizers there too. And those countries significantly had a much lower COVID incidence than we did, and countries in Europe. So I don't mind. And actually, I've got some rather nice masks. Actually, I don't want to throw them out.
Just very, very quickly, Kevin.
It looks better in them. I mean, I wish you would put the paper in. You would stop frightening young children.
Yeah, maybe you can go and get one for us in the break and, show off one of your prime examples. See you in just a moment. Plenty more still to come, including Jo Cox's sister plans to stand, or try to stand, as an MP. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire. They'll come eventually. I'm going to start. Oh, there you are. You're back. Good. So, to the Metro and indeed to the Matt cartoon, Kevin. A small matter of a county court judgment. Tell us more.
Yes, this is the £535 county court judgment 6 months ago against Boris Johnson, listing 10 Downing Street as his address. So somebody has taken legal action against the Prime Minister because he hasn't allegedly paid a debt. Now, to get a county court judgment, you have to have proof you've tried to get the money and you failed. What is the debt for? Number 10 say it is nothing to do with redecoration of the flat. I'm not entirely surprised, because he seems to have got other people to pay for that, taxpayers and wealthy people. So what has he not paid? What could this father have not possibly paid?
Well, Downing Street say it's vexatious. Downing Street say the whole thing is vexatious and they're going to get it struck out. But it does feed into the narrative that Boris and his finances are a bit shambolic, but they do tell us that it's not a serious claim. I think Kevin could make a claim against me in the county court for owing him money. It's the sort of thing he would do, actually. I think you can do that, but it's mysterious.
You can't just invent it. You've got to have some proof that somebody owes you some money.
Well, number 10 say there's nothing to it whatsoever, but they would refuse to say what the detail was.
Yeah. Number 10 said there's nothing to lots of things, and there's been lots of things to their so-called from Dominic Cummings to wallpaper to big policy issues around COVID and the economy.
Well, let's wait and see. Did we see the Matt cartoon? I don't know if we did we? We haven't got it. We'll try and find that at 11:30 when we have you back. Kevin, just a quick word on Batley and Birstall's news about Kim Ledbetter possibly standing in this future by-election.
Yeah, we don't normally have this paper on the review, but it's very welcome now. This is Kim Ledbetter, Jo Cox's sister, and Labour's facing a very challenging by-election there because Tracy Brabin, the MP, is now the West Yorkshire mayor because she's a police and crime because she's got so many responsibilities, including police. She's got to step down. She's laid out a stall, has Ms Ledbetter, saying, "Look, I'll always called the place home." She seems to be a prominent local figure. Labour have to get this by-election right, and they've got to get the right candidate. In Hartlepool, they thought having a COVID doctor would trump his fervent support for Brexit in the past. That didn't happen. Labour wants a local champion, and I think now Leadbitter is the benchmark. Can you get anybody better than her to stand and fight your corner?
OK, didn't quite have time to talk about our final story, which we will, which is Daily Telegraph, the Champions League final, they say, going to Porto, because it's quite interesting and significant. And we'll talk more at 11:30, shall we, Andrew?
But it's ridiculous.
OK.
It's ridiculous. Two English clubs, it should be played in England.
OK.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
well, add it to the list for
ridiculous.
11:30. We'll see you then. Thank you. So we're joined then by Andrew Pearce and Kev Maguire. Quite a range of stories making the front pages tonight, but lots of news around, not least what's happening in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Andrew, in the Times, fears mount over threat of full-scale war in Gaza is their headline, despite rather more promising noises from President Biden tonight. But it's uncomfortable for all residents of both areas, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, it's awful. And it's interesting that this story is now moving closer to the front pages. The Times has always been very strong on its foreign coverage anyway. And it's a big story. Biden has made it absolutely clear, the American administration has made it clear, as did the Foreign Secretary today, that they defend Israel's right to protect itself, because as we know, the Palestinians are hurling lots of bombs and missiles into Tel Aviv and into Jerusalem. But it's intractable, this problem. And you do wonder, with Netanyahu's political future up in the air yet again, I just hope that he's not using this in any way, the military conflict, to bolster his position, perhaps with some of the more extreme potential coalition partners. I mean, is he politicking for the sake of it? But Biden, this is a big test for Biden. He's the new president. There'd have been very little pressure on Israel from Donald Trump. And it'd be interesting to see how much pressure Biden puts on Israel. Remember, the United States are huge financial benefactors of the state of Israel. But Biden, I would have thought, would be much less gung-ho about this than Trump.
Yes, and indeed, after Mr. Biden said he had hopes this would end sooner rather than later, there had been hopes of a ceasefire in the territory, despite one enormous explosion we saw a couple of hours ago. But apparently, Netanyahu has told both his cabinet and Mr. Biden that actually there will be no ceasefire and to prepare for more. So, I mean, depressing. And where do we go from here again, Kevin?
That's right. You want people to stop dying on both sides. You want to stop people firing rocket bombs on both sides. Trump gave Netanyahu free rein, a green light, do what he liked. Biden takes a slightly different position and will try and play an honest broker. I think Israel gets about $4 billion in US military aid. I think it's around that per year. So there is some leverage there. But it's not an entirely equal conflict either. It is intractable, as Andrew says. Peace will have to resolve it in the end, with a formation of a Palestinian independent state, secure Israel. Land will have to be dealt with, and lots of other issues. Otherwise, this will just keep flaring up. But you've got a nuclear-powered, a nuclear-armed state in Israel, and you've got Hamas firing these rockets from the Gaza Strip. But if you look at the death toll, it's something like 6 or 7 higher on the Palestinian side than the Israeli side, which is a reflection of the different military positions. But there is no military solution to this. In the end, it will have to be a negotiated peace that is in the interests of both Israelis and Palestinians.
So explosions in Gaza, sirens, we're told, in Tel Aviv. We watch and wait and see what happens overnight, certainly. Let's move on, shall we, to COVID. First of all, the idea of this Indian variant, one of them anyway, what impact that might have on the reopening. Are there genuine concerns about this now, Andrew?
Yeah, there are, but it makes you wonder why we didn't get India on the red list for flights coming in, because we've seen what's been happening in India, the chaos, the total abject misery of the COVID explosion in India. The variant now, the Indian variant that's been discovered in Britain, it's doubled and tripled in number, more than they wanted, quicker than they expected. So far, though, the epidemiologists have said that they're confident the vaccines can adapt and can contend with the Indian variant. But these variants mutate all the time and keep changing all the time. So that's the worry. So there is this emergency stage meeting, but I suspect unless there's a real problem, there's no way the Prime Minister wants to change that final date of lockdown being lifted of June the 21st. Everything is being geared up for that. In parts of the rest of the papers tomorrow morning, he's talking about getting people back to work by June the 21st. He wants people to stop working from home, and he's going to have to start by leading by example and getting some of those civil servants back in behind their desk, because Whitehall is still a ghost town.
Yes, indeed so, as are many places. Just a final word in the eye on this story about the Indian variant. As I said, I mean, there's three variants, aren't there? But one of them, anyway, there had been a suggestion of localised tiers, but the eye suggesting that children living in the affected areas could be told to continue wearing face masks in schools. So perhaps that is as far as it will get. Let's go on to The Guardian, shall we? A date or a suggested date for the start of this public inquiry. Too far away still for many people, but the complexity and range of this means there will be a lot of preparation, I suppose, Kevin.
There will, but you could, I'm sure, set this up in the autumn if you wish. Pick a chair, pick a panel, staff it, get a venue, give it terms of reference. But what he's really done, the Prime Minister, he's kicked it into the long grass by saying it'll start in a year's time, unlikely to report before the next election, which will be in 2023, the end of 2024 at the very, very latest. He probably doesn't want to have to be examined, and his decisions, certainly the dawdling and the dithering and resisting lockdowns, to be looked at again. What lessons on PPE contracts? What happened with care homes? 127,000 plus died. NHS mass vaccination programme, a huge success, yes, but a lot of mistakes before then. So he doesn't want it. And the people who seem to be most aggrieved, I think, have a right to be so, are the families of the dead, those who are mourning and grieving lost loved ones, and they want to have their say, and they want lessons to be learned and to be seen to be learned in public rather than behind closed doors or just ignored. So, yes, but no, I think it's rather simple by the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people point to a pandemic preparedness test run back in 2016, which showed that we weren't ready for a pandemic. But I guess the NHS runs hot, doesn't it, Andrew? It was always going to be put under pressure because of the way it operates.
Yeah, and there was all this contingency planning for a pandemic, and then they did nothing about it. And that was all happening on the watch of David Cameron, Theresa May, and Jeremy Hunt, of course, who was the longest-serving health secretary. But, you know, I know Kevin thinks the Prime Minister is deliberately trying to stall this till after the general election. But you remember the Tilcott inquiry into the Iraq War didn't start until 6 years after the Iraq War ended, and didn't report until 2016, which was 13 years after the war ended, which was an absolute... So, frankly, this COVID inquiry is almost rapid by comparison. But even if the Prime Minister had gone for it in the autumn, they take on average public inquiries 2.5 years. This one is incredibly complex, very layered. And even if he'd launched it in October this year, I still don't think there'd be a cat and hell's chance it would have reported before the next general election, because we're getting rid of the stupid Liberal Democrat Fixed-Term Parliament Act. Hurrah for that, which means the Prime Minister can call an election at his own timing, which is what Blair always did, Thatcher always did. And so the election will be long before that report comes out.
Yeah, the minutiae of decision-making, the timings of lockdowns, going in and going out of them, the contracts awarded for PPE and other elements, an example of which is back in the Financial Times again today, Kevin.
It is, and hey, what a surprise here. We find that Andrew Feldman, a former Tory party chair, was an unpaid advisor to Lord Bethell, the Health Minister. He runs his own lobbying and PR firm, and then he pushes, and a contract goes to one of his clients, £22.6 million to supply goggles, masks, and gowns. Now, of course, impropriety is denied all round, but what a coincidence. The firm that supplied the equipment, it's got to be said, was already working for the NHS in Wales and Scotland. This contract was in England, so it's not like some of the other companies that just appear to have been set up in pubs and so on. But the old VIP lane, it seems if you knew a Tory or you had the telephone number of a minister, you kind of hit the jackpot and won the lottery.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had the terms of reference, obviously, for the inquiry, but will the allegations of the chimocracy or whatever you want to call it be included, do you think? Andrew?
I think it has to be. And my understanding is there's a whole unit now in the Cabinet Office working flat out full time already on papers, emails, texts that will have to be prepared for the public inquiry. And it will be divided up into various sections. And PPE, failure to provide PPE in the first place, the fact that we had to rely on China, of all places, to get PPE. Don't forget, my newspaper ran a very fine campaign to get PPE too, but it will be a key part of that campaign.
Yeah.
A key part of that, you have to go where you have to go. But I mean, a key part of that campaign will be the failure to provide PPE, and there will also be the suggestion of the chumocracy doing rather well. Don't forget, the health secretary's pub landlord even got in on the act. I still can't quite work out how that happened, but there's no doubt the public inquiry will tell us more about it.
Yeah, I was surprised to see lateral flow tests imported from China still. I had in my mind we'd be making them, but maybe not yet, eventually. But no doubt it'll all be covered. See you in just a moment with plenty more, including 2 English teams playing, you probably know this already, in the Champions League final. So given COVID, why not hold it in England? We will be talking about that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire. Kevin, the Daily Mail headline saying how we're feeling. Boris in the bizarre case of a shock £535 judgment in county court. Speculation's filling the gaps here, I think, isn't it?
Issued last October, Private Eye broke this story. What's it all about? Number 10 said it is not to do with the redecorating of the Downing Street apartments, and there's nothing unusual. He's not been up to anything. He was incredibly chaotic. But the Mail have an explanation claiming that it is from a COVID conspiracy theorist who claims he's repeatedly slandered her, committed repeated defamation, and has billed him for this. And use the online civil monies claim service, which can be as little as £25. Letters were sent to Downing Street, and his name Boris Johnson, not his real name Alexander. No reply. So this order has been given, and the person behind it, according to Her Majesty's Daily Mail, regularly copies in the Queen, House of Lords, House of Commons, and BBC to her complaints, and has also been pursuing Rishi Sunak, Royal Mail, and Marks and Spencers. So that is the explanation given by the Daily Mail.
Say again, Andrew.
I think it's what we call the Green Ink Brigade. I get certain letters which are often copied to the Queen, the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, never to Kevin Maguire actually, with all these doom and gloom conspiracy theories. And you know they're a bit mad because some of the writing, the biblical quotations, start on the back of the envelope. You think, yeah, Green Ink Brigade, Purple Ink Brigade, in the bin.
OK. Apparently it's quite serious, though, to make fraudulent claims against somebody, but obviously they didn't think it was fraudulent. They thought they had a good case. Anyway, we need to move on very quickly, though. The Mac cartoon, if we have it, let's just have a quick look at that one. Tell Boris that the debt collectors have taken the cabinet tables.
He is a god, isn't he?
It's a nice touch, isn't it? Meanwhile, let's go to the Champions League. Andrew, do you want to kick off?
Well, listen, you know what I know about football, you could write in the back of a postage stamp, but it is absolutely insane that Chelsea and Manchester City are in the final of this European competition. First of all, they had to play the match in Turkey, but because Turkey's on the red list, it can't go there. So they want to play it at Wembley Stadium. That would be great. But because these UEFA officials, 2,000 of them want to be on a jolly and a freebie, because that would affect all the quarantine rules, it's going to be held in Portugal of all places. Porto. Now look, Portugal's a very nice country and it's on the green list. But if you were a Chelsea fan or a Man City fan, you'd be pretty cross because you absolutely know the cost of flights to Portugal will be going through the roof for this match.
Yeah, interesting. Kevin?
Fans of Manchester City and Chelsea will enjoy it. It'll be a jolly away. But you've got to weigh up as the government. Like, football is a business. UEFA has a lot of sponsors and hangers on and suits who will want to go to this game. That's 2,000 people. If you can get 4,000 people into the Brits last night, all taking tests to show they were negative beforehand, why can't this 2,000 have negative tests? Because you've got to weigh it up. You're either going to have 2,000 people coming into Britain or you're going to have 12,000 people leaving Britain and going to Portugal and then coming back. So there's going to be a mix of people anyway. I would have thought it would have been better to have played it at Wembley and sorted out the arrival of those 2,000 people.
OK, we'll see what the fans' reaction is. Kevin, Andrew, lovely to see you both. Thank you.